Ladies and gentlemen, I am known as Mr. Vicious. Remo Vinci!
Now the tone
Has begun. And things like that have gone. So I feel like I kind of owe that back to the world in whatever ways I can possibly do it. And I already just pressed record a second ago just so we could start getting into some stuff, and I'll edit things out later or however as we go.
Okay.
But I know when I was doing some research on you and checking some things out and listening to the show, you you talked about so many things that like I have already felt, and just had these feelings and understandings about anyway. You know, so like it just connected all these things, making all these little synapses here, you know what I mean? And it was just awesome. And I knew right away from the get that like you were somebody I had to get to because it surprised me. It surprised me. So without no further ado, can I just go ahead and introduce you here and we'll just get into it?
Yes.
Awesome. So everybody, this is Mr. Vicious Remo Vinci, and I'm back with the brand new version of our Vicious interview series. And I'm real blessed and honored to have this guest with us today. She is somewhat of a family member, actually. Her husband and my family actually go back to the same little town in New Mexico, and we're related somewhere along the line there, I know. And she's doing amazing things here. And I was just explaining to her that this whole idea of these interview series is all based off of inspiration. Just inspirational people that are doing things in their lives to help other people, or they have stories that other people can relate to. And there's just so much to be said about that human connection, like we've talked about in other episodes before. So, with no further ado, everybody, I want you to help me welcome Kisha to the show today. And she is a metaphysical mindset and spiritual coach and a B Girl and podcast host of the Baddie Activation podcast. So give it up for Kisha. Oh shit, there she goes. So Keisha, like I was telling you, we'll keep it hella casual. We're just having a conversation, just telling me a little bit about your story. You know what I mean? Um, I just want to say welcome to the show. And I want to tell you, I love your show. I know that it's geared towards women, but it's got so many lessons and so much advice that could be just universal for anybody. And I love all aspects of it. I love how you incorporate hip hop into it, and how like you're so relatable. You remind me of like all my homegirls. You know what I'm saying? So like, I guess my first question I want to ask you. Uh, you're a hip hop head just like I am. So I'm positive that you've seen that movie Brown Sugar.
Yes.
And in that movie Brown Sugar, she always asks everybody the same thing first off. And it's, when did you fall in love with hip hop? So
Ooh.
I'm gonna ask you that.
Okay, so that's a good question. I'm gonna break it down a little bit because I was introduced into hip hop in high school. So, funny thing about me, I actually went to a Catholic middle school. So,
Okay.
high school, I didn't really know too much about hip hop, and it's so funny because I was just thinking about this a couple days ago. Literally, one of my first songs, and I didn't really vibe with it. It was TLC. Like that was back in the day when TLC came out, and like I remember that was the jam. I'm like, it was okay, but it wasn't really my thing. When I got to high school, I ended up going to a public high school, and it was just like, oh my gosh, like what the hell did I just step into? But I remember when I started high school, falling in love with breakdancing. Like there's the breakers, there's the gangsters, right? There's all these like cliques and everything. And it was the breakers that I loved the music. I love the dancing. I love the vibe. So I would say that's when I first started to dance a little bit with hip hop. And then, if I'm being like completely honest, I really fell in love with hip hop when I met my husband. My husband is huge into music. So coming into the relationship, I'm like, oh my gosh, like my favorite movie is Beach Street. His favorite movie is Beach Street. So once we made that connection, we're like, okay, we're destined to be together. And so it was really with him that I just fell more in love with music because that's our thing. That's how we vibe. That's our love language. Like we have a massive vinyl collection. We both collect vinyl. We both love music, and it's all kinds of different types of music too. So yeah, that's the beginning of my hip hop love.
I love that. I love that. That's awesome. That's awesome to be able to share that connection. Like you said, it's like your love language. And to me, I know I'm a little further distant type of cousin and whatnot, but I'm sure that you guys have seen like I'm very much into my music and how it's a big part of my life. So I couldn't picture it without it. And I've always kind of expressed it the same way that music is like a tool of emotions. You know, like no matter what you're going through, no matter what it is, there's always some kind of song to match it, some kind of beat to match it, some kind of feeling or vibe that just takes you wherever you need to be. And like it's a universal language. It doesn't matter if it's in a different language or a different type of genre, like it can hit you at any time. And that's the beauty of it, you know. So that's pretty cool. But back to your show, I wanted to ask you if you could explain to people like me that don't really know a whole lot about a lot of these type of things. What is a metaphysical life coach?
So I feel like where I kind of want to go with the story is I want to explain kind of where I got to where I'm at today, right?
Please, by all means.
It's always important to understand the why and where you got to. So for me, I've been into mindset work. So let's start on the mindset piece, right? So I've been into mindset work for probably over 10 years, and I was introduced to mindset work through my corporate career. So I've been in corporate America for over 20 years, and about 10 years ago or so, I read a book. Now, prior to reading this book, I hadn't picked up a book since school. Like I just was not a reader, wasn't my thing. And I was introduced to this book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. It's a very impactful book. I mean, after I read this book, it really influenced my corporate path. So in the book, she talks about two different mindsets, a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, which they're both pretty much self-explanatory. A growth mindset is someone who's curious, constantly wanting to grow and learn new things and open to learning new things, right? Whereas a fixed mindset is someone who is like, well, I was born this way. I'm not able to learn any new skills. It is what it is.
Hmm.
After I read the book, I immediately identified with the growth mindset. And that allowed me to go down this path of self help. And I just fell in love with reading any type of book that had to do with self help. In my mind, if I'm going to read something, I need to learn something. Like I just can't just pick up a book and read it. So I just became obsessed with learning about mindset work. And then that led me to motivational speakers and listening to YouTube. I like to say that I have a master's degree in YouTube because I've learned so much shit from YouTube. It's ridiculous.
That's
So I
incredible.
started to just consume this content, and I started to really subscribe to this concept of like learning new skills and building upon that. And what's crazy is that I was really just focusing with my career, and everything that I was learning, I was implementing within my career space. And I was able to start climbing the career ladder. And I'm someone who's always climbing the ladder, like, what's next? What's next? And I feel like that mindset work really gave me that foundation to do that. So I'm always someone who practice what I preach. And so
Mhm.
I'm learning about all this. I'm putting it into play. It's working for me. Like I'm moving along in my career. And what's interesting is at that time, I was just using these methods or this concept with my job with corporate. I didn't really think about how I can use them within my home life or my personal life. I wasn't quite at that level. So that's the mindset piece, right? And so that's part of the coach is really helping people with the mindset. And it honestly, it comes down to your thoughts. Like we are our thoughts, right? We can
Yeah.
be as sick as our thoughts are, or we can be as healed as our thoughts are, or as positive. Like it all starts with the thoughts. So jumping over to the metaphysical side, right? In my mind, that's really like the spiritual piece, right? Like we all have spirits, we all, and it's not really like a religion. I feel like religion and spirituality are two different paths. So the reason how I got into more of the spiritual piece. And this is really going to speak to my why and again, how I got to today. So I'm going to go deep because, like you
Oh,
said, like it's really important to share our stories. And it's
mm-hmm.
also important to understand like how I got to where I'm at, because it's not like I just didn't wake up one day and like, oh my God, I'm going to be a coach and I'm going to have this podcast. Like it took
Oh,
time
that's
to get
great.
there.
That's
So
great. Please.
so what I'm going to talk about, it is a trigger warning because it does have to do with abuse. But about, I'd say, gosh, 6 years ago or so, my one of my daughters it came out that she was a victim of sexual abuse. And at this time, I'm like, it was a shock to me, my family, and like we were just like so freaking surprised, and like it was just so much chaos going on around this time. So she was already a young adult. And when this came out, obviously, was when she was a child. So at the time, I didn't really know too much about trauma, sexual abuse, or anything like that. So I did what I always do, right? I just started educating myself and getting, going to YouTube and reading books and trying to learn about the situation. And I know a lot of times people can sometimes be confused as to why like children don't report abuse. But the reality is, when a child is abused, they're a child. They don't know what to do with that situation, those emotions, those feelings. They're confused themselves. So, for so long, she did what a lot of victims do, and that's to suppress what's going on and hide it and sweep it under the rug. So you can only do that for so long. And things started to manifest. And this was again when she was a young adult. She started to display certain behaviors where I'm like, hold on, something's going on. And thank goodness we were able to uncover this secret pretty quickly. And I just remember as a family having this conversation with her. And when she was telling us her story, I told her, I'm like, well, why didn't you tell anyone? Of course, because that was my first reaction. And she didn't really have an answer, which at the time I understand that, why she didn't have the answer. But I told her, I was like, we need to do something. Like the mama bear kicked in. I was like, I'm not the type of person to sweep this under the rug. Like we are going to the police. Like we're going to report this and everything. And I'll never forget. I mean, it still to this day gives me chills, but she looked at me and she goes, I'm ready. And that's the thing with, unfortunately, with victims, like they have to be ready. They have to be ready to share their truth, and they have to be ready to take that next step. So when she told us that, my husband and I both immediately came together as a unit and supported her. And we went to the police. We filed a report. And even at this time, I did not have a lot of faith in the justice system. Like, number one, I've never dealt with the justice system, so I had no idea what we were even getting into, number one.
Yeah.
So I just remember the beginning, like, well, this is what we need to do. And we're just going to like check the box. And I didn't even know, like I said, how far we were going to get. So thank goodness when we walked into the police station, the detective that was there was there. And I will always call him our angel because he took her statement and he was able to identify a second victim. He was able to bring about charges. Like he was on his shit, and we were able to, move to the next step. So the problem with this type of situation, and it's not even really a problem, I think it's just unfortunately facts, is that a lot of women don't report abuse. Oh, that's my home line, sorry. I still have a landline. So a lot of women do not report abuse because of the fact that they're afraid that no one's going to believe them. They are afraid that it happened too long ago and there's nothing that we can do about it. So just the fact that we made it to that police station, like that's big. Not a lot of people even make it to that step. So when we were notified that, yes, we're going to bring back charges, we're going to arrest the person, the suspect actually ended up being, which this is also another common fact with abuse, ended up being someone of a position in trust. And I'm not talking about like a creepy uncle or a distant cousin. Like this was someone who was in our lives. Like we hung out with this person. Like it was a total shock. So that part started happening. Everything started moving, and it was moving so fast. We're just like, oh my gosh, what do we do? So I just remember it being such a chaotic time from start to finish. We probably dealt with this for about 3 years. I will say before I unpack a few things, we did get a guilty verdict. Like we ended up in trial. The Chomo is in prison right now. Like he got the sentence that he deserved. So we did get, I want to say like a happy ending, but not a lot of people get that. Like I learned so much in that process, and that's what I'll get into as far as like the spiritual piece. But I just remember in the beginning having to put on this front for my kid, right? Because I'm mom. I have to make sure that I'm strong for her and I'm taking care of business with her. But it was so hard. It was so hard. And it got to a point where the stress for her started to get out of hand. And I just remember at this time feeling that, I have to take over. Like I need to step up and deal with everything. And for the first like year and a half, I'd say maybe, yeah, about a year and a half, I would wake up every single day with so much hate in my heart and so much like disgust. And I saw so much evil, like what was going on in the situation. And when I talk about the power of thoughts, it's like every single day having to think about this over and over and over again, it started to take a toll on my mind and my body and my soul. And because of the fact that I had the foundational work of mindset, I feel like that set me up for the next level. So I, of course, go to YouTube and I start looking for similar stories. And I start hearing how other people got through, abuse. And I started to hear stories of how people, women, men, everyone are able to just heal themselves from this type of shit. So I just did what I always do, and I just started doing research and learning and self educating myself on how to do that. And I started to heal from all of this trauma, even though we were still like in the neck of the freaking trial and the case. Like, I got to a point where I started to heal and I started to alchemize those thoughts, meaning I started to change those negative thoughts into something more powerful and positive because I needed to be that positive, powerful person for my child. And we all have our own story and path with the situation. So I can only share my experience. Like I can't share anyone else's. But as a mother going through it, like it was crazy. And there were times where I just like I wanted to give up, but I knew I couldn't. And there was something inside of me that was like, you got this. So you got this. It's like this inner knowing that we all have. I like to call it our higher self. And it started to speak to me, and I'm like, what the heck's going on here? Like, am I hearing voices? And so I started to lean into it more. And that's the metaphysical piece. That's like the piece where it's like, there's something more than just, our bodies. Like we have this soul and we have this knowing. And these practices, law of attraction, manifestation, self love, like all of this has been around for so long. It just didn't happen overnight. So I started to use some of those tools in my healing process. Like I'm not even kidding you when I tell you that I visualized that guilty verdict so many times that it just was programmed in my mind that it became a feeling and a knowing and a thought that I started to not stress so much about that process, which allowed me to refocus my energy into my family and myself. So fast forward, this was also during COVID, so that just prolonged the situation. When we got to the trial part, that was like chaos again. And this is where I had another pivotal moment in my life because I saw firsthand the justice system and how, and I know it's just by design, but how they treat victims. Like when the victims were up testifying, they were treated like shit. Like I understand that the bad guy has their lawyer and they're paying this lawyer all kinds of money to keep them out of jail and try to paint them as this perfect person. And it's their job to attack these victims. But it was horrible. Again, like just breaking my heart to see what the victims were put through. So, we got the guilty verdict. That was good. But I remember at that process having this overwhelmness of feelings that I needed to do something more. Like I had this knowing, like, you need to do something more. And I swear to you when I say I had a thought of me getting involved in the justice system. And I don't know if that was me maybe becoming a police officer, a detective, a lawyer. Like I felt like I needed to be a part of the system to change. But then I took a step back and I was like, that's not the path I want. So then that is when, based upon the mindset work I've been doing, and then started learning about law of attraction and manifestation and healing and our thoughts, like that's when the idea of becoming a coach came to me, because I felt like the way I can have an impact is A, sharing my story, and then B, helping other women heal from their trauma. So many women have unhealed trauma that started when they were a child, and they don't ever heal from it, and it carries over into being an adult, and it shows in so many ways. A lot of times people who are abused will attract that kind of relationship, and they continue with a cycle. And I started to see that cycle, and I needed it to stop. And so that is where my why, that's my why to what I do now. So what's interesting is I love podcast. At the time, my podcast library is freaking bananas. I follow so many different people, and I absolutely fell in love with a podcaster, and she's a coach. And I just remember thinking, I was like, she has such an impact on women. Like, that's what I want. And I was like, I want to be her. And so I remember she had offered some one-on-one coaching. And so I signed up with it, and I got to like do Zoom coaching with her. And like, I felt like I was meeting a movie star. Cause like when you listen to podcasters, like you listen to them for like, forever, and you don't, it's rare that you get to meet them. So I was like cheesing out. And I told her my story, and I told her what I wanted to do. And so at this time, I was like, I really just want to pursue a coaching career. Like I want to help women. And so she's like, yeah, that's great. That's great. And when are you going to start your podcast? And I was like, ooh, what? Like, I don't know if I want to do a podcast. And so through some coaching and like self-discovery questions, I was like, you know what? I can do that. And so she really helped me create the podcast. Like I'm not that good with technology. So she worked with me on, just getting the account set up and recording and editing. And then, I just like hit the floor running, and I've been doing that ever since. And so, my bigger intention is always just to help people, heal from trauma. Or not everyone, maybe that's not, your situation. Maybe you lack confidence or something. Like I like to help people find that confidence and lean on our power that we have as humans to heal from anything, and to really attract what we want in our life, like to live our best life. So many times people are like, well, I can't do this because of this reason. And it's like, no, you really can. So sorry, that was a lot. That was a lot. I'll pause.
No, you know what? That was incredible. And it was a lot, but it was absolutely necessary. I'm glad that you were able to share all of that with us, because there's so many things I actually want to say about it. For one, to be brave enough to go through all of that, and to know that there's some kind of uh inspiration in you, that you need to change something about it. That's huge, to know that you can do that, and that you will do that. Like you said, it's all a mindset. So I think that that's a huge thing on its own. But I too come from I'm a victim of abuse when I was a kid. You know what I mean? And there's so many people that I know in my life, and that I've been connected with in other areas, that have also been victims, male and female. So a lot of the things that you say, like you talk about healing, for women and whatnot, like that's a universal thing. Everybody still carries on these traumas. No matter what happens to anybody in their lives, like they may not have had the same type of abuse, but they may have been abused in other ways or whatnot. And I've seen also, like how you have firsthand, how that affects people as they turn into adults, and how it perpetuates these cycles. And those kind of things are scary. And when you do find that courage inside of yourself to be a part of the solution, and not the problem, and to try and help people through it, or even if it's just healing through it, then there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's a very admirable thing. So thank you for sharing that whole story with us, and telling us what your why is.
Yeah.
um, I have never been well versed, I could say, in like the law of attraction. I did several years back, I did kind of fall into a bit of a wormhole, kind of, learning some things and checking stuff out. But I'm born and raised Catholic. I'm very involved in the church. So like I've always kind of focused most of my mindset towards that type of a theology or a psychology or whatever you want to call it. I have oftentimes though been challenged with a lot of my thought process, and I have been around people that have helped me grow in lots of areas with that. So I like to hear about these other differing, types of mindsets and just different ways that people go about things, because I honestly feel as though like we're all trying to get to the same place anyway. We just have different paths and different journeys along the way, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's the beauty of life, to be honest with you, is that we all do have such diverse, stories and reasons and whys of why we do things and where we're going. So it's cool to be able to intertwine that and be a part of each other's stories, you know?
Definitely.
So thank you again for telling us about that. Like I said, I was doing some research and I was listening to some shows, and I kind of fell into like a whole binge of them the other day. And I went through like your whole series about this unapologetic era. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that because I feel like that may be what has brought you to your point in your life, obviously, to where you're now you're doing the things that make you feel good for you, for who you are and being your true self, and trying to express that openly, and how you're incorporating that with helping other people. I think that that's a big part of that for you. I also feel like that's a big part of that for me. And I feel like there's several other people that I'm connected with that are kind of in that same era. So maybe if you could just explain a little bit about that to some of our listeners, what is an unapologetic era, and why does it seem like a lot of us are in that right now? Maybe it's like a world thing. I don't know.
Yeah. So sometimes that can come off as like, being unapologetic and in a negative way, right? Like I'm not saying unapologetic error is like giving women or men permission to be a bitch, right? Or to be a douchebag. Like that's not what it's about. It's about owning who you truly are, what your beliefs, what your desires are. I'm so huge on desires, like it's crazy. And a lot of times people are embarrassed by them. They think that they sound silly, and so, they hide them. So stepping into this unapologetic era is really just owning your authentic self. So I know for me, and I talk a lot about this on the podcast, like, I'm a hip hop head. I love breakdancing, right? And for so many years, I would be at these jams and the cipher goes on and everyone's dancing. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I want to be in that circle. I want to be in that circle. And I just had this love and desire, and it would never go away. And so our desires, they don't go away. Like it could be a desire that we've had when from being a teenager to now. And if you still have that same desire, then I like challenge you to lean into that. Like that means something. So it's funny because right around, and so all this time, it was always just me wishing that I was in the circle. And the limiting beliefs started to come up, whereas I would tell myself, I'm not strong enough. I'm a girl. I'm not good enough. Like, I haven't been dancing since I was like little. Like that, like I'm like all of these limiting beliefs would come up that would prevent me from even trying to dance. So right when I started the podcast, again, I'm all about like experimenting what I talk about and things like that. I signed up for a breakdancing class. I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm gonna just sign up for the class. Like, let me just sign up for the class. It's one class, no commitment. If I could do it, I could do it. If I can't, I can't. And that was, it's been about a year and a half. And I've been going, like, I go once a week. I've really leaned into that part of me because dance has always been a part of me, and I just would show little pieces of it throughout my years. But now I'm like I'm out in the open when it comes to my dance. And so that's part of being unapologetic. Like I am a B girl. Like I love dancing. I'll own that. And it's funny because like my kids always give me shit. They're like, "Oh my gosh, mom, like what are you saying now?" And so what that's what it's really about is like being yourself and loving yourself and not really caring about what people think. People are always going to have opinions and they're always going to judge you. And I love the saying, other people's opinions are none of your business. So I don't care what other people think about me. Like I'm still going to go out there and shine. And I love how I have found a community that supports that. Like every week when I go to class, like I have my dance homies now, and like it's just so much fun. Like life should be fun. You know what I mean? Like that's what it's all about. And so just chasing your desires and, not apologizing for it. Like I can't even tell you the last time where I've like, oh, I apologize for, wanting to do this. Like that's really what it's about, being unapologetic.
I love that. Thank you for the explanation with it. And like I was saying, it seems like so many people are in this era right now, or at least around me, it seems. And I was wondering, do you think COVID had anything to do with that? Do you think us being suppressed and locked up and like being forced to like take all, to realize all of these things that we were taking for granted? Do you think that kind of lit a little bit of a spark underneath us as a people?
I think that's a good question, and it's a good thought, right? And so off the top of my head, I'd say yeah, because I think back to the beginning of COVID, and like honest to God, we probably thought that we were gonna die. Like I literally, like, me and my husband were just like, what's going on? Like, are we gonna make it? Like, is this the end of the world? Like it was so scary up front. And then we started to kind of I hate to say this, but we started to normalize COVID.
Mhm.
And I know that everyone has their own journey with COVID and their own stories, because there was a lot of loss. There was a lot of just, there was a lot of death, right? A lot of sadness with COVID. And I could say that at least for us, we became closer as a family. Like it really brought us more closer. And I feel like we thrived a little bit in COVID, but I agree. I do think that aloneness really helped a lot of people awaken a little bit, because a lot of like metaphysical and spirituality work, it's inner work, it's
Yeah,
self-discovery, it's you yourself, right? So you think about
exactly.
COVID and people were isolated, so that can go one of two ways. You can either be super scared of being alone with yourself, because some people are, or you can thrive. And I think that was for me. I started to thrive or learn how to thrive just being alone with myself and working on myself.
I agree. I think that's a great point. And also, to go back to the point about thriving during that time, I feel like you had mentioned a minute ago about how you're a big podcast fan. I feel like that's when a giant surge of podcasts started happening too, because all of a sudden people started having time
Yeah.
to start wanting to do things like that. So I guess I'm kind of curious. You said you have this wide array of different podcasts that you're a fan of. Give us a couple that we may not think that you would be into. Something that would surprise us possibly.
Well, they all have to do with self-help, manifestation, law of attraction. I'm a huge fan of like Mel Robbins, motivational speaker, right? So the one podcast that really changed, helped me change, was called the Baddie B Mindset. And she's the one who I set up my coaching session with. And it's so funny because she's the podcast that really helped me relook at the term baddie, because I'm not going to lie, before her podcast and before me embracing my podcast, I didn't vibe with the term baddie. Like it reminded me of the freaking like those horrible fucking TV shows where it's like baddie ATL and all the girls are just like fighting with each other. Like social media and media itself really gave the term baddie like negativity, negative vibe behind that term. So when I listened to the Baddie B mindset, like she really shift the focus to a baddie being someone who is, owning her shit, working on limiting beliefs, practicing self-love, owning their desires, and just like elevating themselves. And she like turned it into something positive and beautiful. And I just fell in love with it. And it's so funny because I remember when I set up my coaching with her and I told her, I was like, this is what I want to do. And I had already thought of the term baddie activation for my coaching business. And I felt like what she was doing, so her name is Stephanie, what she was doing was she was creating baddies. Like that was her intention through her podcast. So in my mind, I'm like, your intention was to create baddies. That's what you did with me, because now I identify as a baddie and I want to help activate other baddies with, other women. I want to help activate their baddie, with other women. And so when I pitched it to her, I was a little scared. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's gonna think I'm a biter. Like she's gonna tell me, don't use my word and like change it. And the minute I told her, she's like, I love it. Go for it. So the support that I got from her, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this shit's amazing. So that's one that I listen to on a daily. Jay Shetty, I love Jay Shetty.
Good.
There's like there's a few like Mindset Babe. There's a few that, I'll talk about mindset, but it's the same thing. It's like, if I'm going to listen to a podcast, I'm going to learn something. And that's
Mhm.
the thing. When I started to get into law of attraction and manifestation, that was all new stuff for me.
Yeah.
Like I never heard about that shit back in high school, like never. But what's interesting is like, you start to attract that type of energy and that type of content, and the shit's been around for ages and ages. So it's so like refreshing to hear other people talk about it, because again, it kind of reaffirms like this shit's real.
hmm No, that's great. I'm glad you're able to clear some of that up. Like I said, for a lot of people like me, like I've barely been able to dip a toe into some stuff. You know what I mean? Because uh, part of it is because reluctancy. Maybe fear, because I feel like there's me maybe making a mistake by trying to entertain the thoughts of other things. You know what I'm saying? Or there's another part of it where it's like, I know everything is still all connected one way or another. You know what I mean? And it's like, maybe I'm just afraid of trying to be open. I think that's a lot of it for a lot of people. So I appreciate people like you that are willing to step up and be like, no, this is what's up. And you're trying to like show, the rest of us what you have learned and what you've come from. I don't know if you've been able to see the other show I'm on, the Drobro show, but I have a buddy Grim on there where he's a very convicted in a lot of his beliefs, and he's such a knowledgeable person to where, even if I don't agree with whatever he may be throwing at me, I can still respectfully understand him, and he can still respectfully convey, whatever point he's trying to come across. And I think that that's important in life, is for us to be able to understand each other and to not be quick to shut each other down or to judge or to feel any of those negative thoughts like you were talking about. I think the positive energy is really contagious, and we need to be willing to be able to put that out there, because this world needs more of it. You can never have too much positive energy. you know
Exactly.
that is not a thing. No, I don't care who you are. So again, about this unapologetic era, and going along with what I was just saying here, I want to be able to thank you for embracing yours and doing what you have done in your unapologetic era, because look at what you've already spawned. I mean, what do you have? 50 some episodes, I think, or something like that, of your show?
Yeah, I think I'm getting close to like 60, but yeah.
See, that's incredible. That's awesome. Like, and it happens that quickly. And I guess that's my next question is, as far as like doing the podcast goes, I know you touched on it a little bit, but talk a little bit more about your experience in recording and the producing of it, the engineering, and like jumping into that whole field, because doing what you're doing as far as like coaching goes is one thing, but then you got to tackle this whole other thing. And granted, it's not necessarily rocket science, but it is a whole new endeavor also. So talk about that and how that's been, and what you found comfortable.
Yeah, so I know it's funny because like in the beginning, I went through an exercise with my coach, and she was like, write down 12 things or 12 topics that you are comfortable with speaking about. And we were doing this during our session. So I was like, oh yeah, da da da. And she's like, all right, that's like 12 sessions or 12 episodes. That's like 3 months of content right there. I was like, oh my gosh, that was like super easy, because that was like my fear in the beginning. Like, again, when she hit me with like, when are you going to start your podcast? I'm like, ooh, what? And so, of course, in the beginning, I'm like, well, what am I going to talk about? Am I like, how am I going to get this information? And so, when we went through that first exercise, like that gave me the confidence to keep going. And I know that in the beginning, like every now and then I would get this thought like, am I going to stop like thinking of content? Like, what if I don't have anything to talk about? And anytime I would get that thought in, like I would continue to build like a list. And so that thought just ended up going away because it's like I'm constantly getting downloads throughout my day of like topics. And so I no longer at this point feel like I'm ever going to run out of topics, like maybe sure years down the road. But I feel like for me, because of the fact that I've been doing this for this long and I'm so open to it. And again, I'm still educating myself. Like personal growth and this journey that we're all on, like it doesn't stop at this point.
Never
It,
stops.
it's a continuous journey and I love it. And so I'm constantly learning new things and I'm bringing that to the podcast. And so I had to learn how to time management is key. Like in the beginning I was kind of like all over the place and try to just get everything done on Sundays, and then like now I've gotten so much better at like I'll do more planning throughout the week, so then on Sunday it's just like hopefully my episodes already recorded and I just plug and play and do a little social media stuff, and there's still opportunities for me to enhance what I'm doing. Like I'm not big on social media, and that's the other thing is like,
Careful.
like a lot of people think like, oh, you got to have like 1 million followers on social media to have a successful podcast. Well, no, you don't, because I have a successful podcast. I'm loving it. And I don't really do a lot of social media. So there's always going to be opportunity for growth. But yeah, it's like I do everything, right? And this is the thing is like, in addition to doing the podcast, like I still have a full-time job. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister. Like I wear so many different hats, but it's all hats that bring me love and joy. So it never feels like I'm like overworked. Sure, there's times where I'm like, you know what, I need a break. Maybe I won't record this weekend. I'll just take a minute off. But everything I do is like it brings me love and passion. Like it's my passion, it's my desires coming to fruition. So there's a saying, it's like if you do what you love you don't ever feel like you're working or something like that, and I believe it because everything I put in a lot of time and effort into just getting the episode recorded and upload it, but like it brings me satisfaction, and I love it.
Well, it definitely comes across in the show. You know what I mean? Like, I obviously I don't know. Do you do like you don't do like a video version of it, right? It's all audio, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, through your voice, you're able to convey that excitement and that kind of passion, and I love it. You know what I mean? It makes it so much more relatable, and also like, you keep it kind of short and sweet and simple. Like you don't have crazy long marathon episodes or anything like that. There's been some like as short as 10 to 12 minutes. So it's not like you're overdoing anything. I feel like when you get into your topics, like you're very sincere with everything, and you just kind of lay it down and just spit that game. You know what I mean? So I think it's pretty cool. And like I have never really um been as close, to you guys. So I've never known you like that. As far as like my interpretation of you, I always thought you were kind of quiet. You know what I mean? And didn't really see a whole lot of this. So to see this side of you is just like awesome. You know what I mean for me, and to see how fruitful it is, and how much you're helping people.
Yeah, and you hit it because it's transformation, because you're right. Like me 5 years ago, hell no. Me doing a podcast, like you're right. I am a very shy person. I am a very introverted person. Like I'm quiet and this and that. And like for me to be able to like be so authentic and share my stories, like even what I shared earlier with you, like that's
Yeah,
growth. That's transformation, right? And so yeah, there's a lot of beauty there. But I mean that's life. Like we should always be elevating who we are. Like I don't want to be the same person I was, 10 years ago. And 5 years from now, I don't want to be who I am today. I want to be, something even bigger. Like I could just continue to grow. It's so funny because I mean, I'm a petite woman. I'm like 5 foot. So physically I cannot grow, but mentally and spiritually, like that growth is endless.
yep, yep, exponentially. You could do anything you want to do with that. I wanted to get into one more thing. We talked a little bit about hip hop earlier, and you know how there's four elements. I wanted to get your opinion on something.
Yeah.
I know you're obviously into the breaking, like you said. Now you have this new interest into DJing you were talking about, and I learned on your podcast also. I want to ask you about that in a minute. But I believe I used to do articles for the school newsletter in high school about hip hop. So yeah, so I have always felt like there is this unspoken fifth element to hip hop, and I think it's the gear. I think it's the clothes.
I love it. Yep. Yep, for sure.
Nobody ever talks about that, and it blows my mind every single time. It drives me insane. I'm like, how? Because I've heard them talk about a fifth element before, and it's never been closed. I can't even remember what they talk about, but it's never closed. And I'm like, the gear's a big part of it, man. Like that's a huge element of hip hop. You know, it's another form of expression of how we've done. So
Yeah.
anyway, I like to talk to other hip hop heads about hip hop stuff like that. But about the DJing. So what made you decide to want to get into that and to start DJing yourself in this vinyl collection you're talking about?
Yeah, so my husband has always collected vinyl. Like when I came into the marriage, he already had a really good collection, and he's already, he had turntables, and it's so funny because this kind of goes back to limiting beliefs. So I've always had a connection with music, and I've always been around the turntables for 20 years, but yet I was always intimidated. Like I could throw on a record, I know how to play some records and things like that, but like the skills my husband has, I'm not there. And it's funny because like I remember thinking back, I'm like, oh, I'll learn that one day. Like, they're always gonna be here, we're always gonna be together. Like I'll learn it one day. So I kept putting it off and putting it off. And then when I just got into this space of embracing my desires, it's like one of those other desires was always me being a DJ. Like every time we would go out, like I was always focusing on the DJ and like, what are they doing? And like, oh my gosh, like they just will always seem so magical to me. But again, I'm like, well, I can't do that. Like those limiting beliefs like really got the best of me. And so after I tackled the limiting belief of breakdancing, I'm like, you know what? I'm on a roll. Like DJing is next. And so, I started to just, share. My husband's always known that that's been a passion of mine. And, he invested in some equipment with me for me. And even that, like when I got the equipment, I like that. I was scared. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what do I do now? Like I bit too much off. Like I like went big with the shit that we got. And I started to get scared with I couldn't even like turn it on. I'm like, come on, I got this. So I worked through that, and now I've been, practicing more. And the vision that I have is that there's this bar here in Denver. It's called Fort Greene. And I love it. Like the vibe is just amazing. And I've always had this vision of me just throwing a huge house party there and me being the DJ. So that's really my vision that I'm working on right now. And that's like what's really helping me practice getting in the time, because like I'm gonna throw a dope ass party and I'm gonna DJ that shit.
I love that. That is so freaking cool. I'm telling you, if we ever do like I want to do what do they call it? A release party at some point for this new album I'm trying to drop. And if anybody can step up, you know what I mean? It would be nice to have a dope ass DJ up there throwing it down for me. But for real though, I think that's awesome to jump into something like that. And I know that that was one of the challenges you talked about on your show there about taking that step and not being afraid to turn it on. I
Yeah.
know you said even just turning it on was a big step. So that's awesome, and I think that that's cool. And I'm glad that you're able to share those kind of things too, because that's what makes you relatable. You know what I mean? Is being able to be vulnerable and tell the truth. You know, and tell what's going on and stuff. So I love that. You were just talking a little bit about a Denver bar. Are you a Denver native? Are you born and raised here?
I am, yeah.
Okay, cool. So tell me a little bit about like some of the hot spots back in your days and some of the changes that you've seen. Because I mean, we've all been through a lot, especially since this big old weed boom that we've had here.
Yeah. So I grew up around 20th and Federal. So that was my upbringing. I went to North High School. So to be honest with you, like it's funny because like my high school stories and my husband's high school stories are like night and day. Like my husband was like super popular. He was thriving in high school. Like it's so funny to hear his stories. But I didn't really like to be honest with you, I wasn't a good student. I didn't really hang around the right people. Like my high school years, like I'm not really even like proud of them. Like it's funny to hear like my husband talk about his time and mine. I'm like, oh, I just wanted to get out of school. So
Yeah.
I got through that and I've always just like kind of lived around that area. And then, I had my first child. I was 19 when I had my first child. So as a young mom, I had to just like I had to grow up overnight, number one. Unfortunately, like a lot of young Latina women, like the baby daddy was a freaking deadbeat. So it's like I was a single parent immediately. But I had my parents were around and they helped and supported me. And so I just, a young mom raising my child. I met my husband when she was around 3 years old. And this is pretty fun and interesting. And this is new because I've never shared this with a lot of people, but me and my husband, like, we knew immediately that we were going to get married. And I'm not even kidding you, when we legally got married, like 6 months after we met each other. And then, and then we planned the big wedding. And, so we planned the wedding a year after. So it's funny, like, and we've been married now for, over 20 years. Like we're about approaching 21 years and been together for 22 years. So,
Uh,
like, the bulk of my life, when I think about it, is really with him. Like, we were just thinking about this. It's like I've spent most of my adult life being married and with my partner, right? And so my life, my life with him and our kids, like that's really what my history is just raising our girls. And my husband had a son coming into the relationship. We each had a child. And so yeah, like we've just been living life and vibing. And it's crazy to think about how we've been together for so long. And like sometimes it feels like we just met. So I really lucked out with meeting him.
I love that, and I love that you give it up to him for that. When I went for that little surprise party you guys had there, what was it, a year or two ago? I
Yeah, yeah.
just the vibe that y'all have together is just cool, man. It's just a cool thing to see. You know what I mean? You guys have something that honestly it seems to be kind of rare these days. So I love that, and I love that you give it up to him for it. Um, I just had something great and I lost it because you were saying the amazing stuff right there, and I wanted to jump in and ask you about it. But oh, I was at your wedding. Do you remember that? Do you remember me dancing with you?
Yeah, yes,
Oh,
yes.
man, it seems like a whole lifetime ago. Jeez, that's crazy. Um, I was asking about the hot spots. Was there any other like hot spots that you used to kick it at back in the day?
Yeah, so it's funny because so this is how I met my husband at a bar. So you can find love at a bar. Um but yeah, we used to always hit up Foxes. And so it's
Okay.
funny because like Foxes used to change locations
Mm.
and it started popping up at the Chili Pepper. And my dad used to manage the Chili Pepper. And so my dad's like, yeah, there's like a club, showing up over here. And so I used to think I was fucking hot shit because my dad would be able to get me in for free and I would drink for free. And I ended up, I saw my husband out a couple times. And then it was like the third time or so, we was at the Chili Pepper and I was leaving and he was walking in. And I just remember thinking like, he looks familiar. I've been seeing this guy around. And again, it's like, sometimes I think back and I'm like, I think I always had like this somewhat like inner knowing or like psychic ability because like I remember just feeling like I think I'm meant to talk to this guy. So I ended up leaving and then we came back and then we ended up connecting. We were dancing on the dance floor all night and then that was it, like game over. But yeah, in the beginning of our relationship we were always going out because that was our thing. We would go out and dance and have fun. And but yeah, we would hit up Foxes a lot. Even thinking back to like, oh gosh, I'm trying to think, like I remember a couple like 16 and over clubs. But it was like there was one off of like Sixth and Sheridan. I
Uh,
can't I can't think of the name, but yeah, I remember going out to a couple like 16 and over clubs. But that was really it. Like even when I had turned 21, like I maybe went out once or twice, but I didn't really start going out a lot until I met my husband.
well, that's dope. I know when I was doing my thing, we used to go downtown a lot, down to some of the little spots down there. There was a club called Bash there for a while. They used to promote on the
do
on
remember
the
that
a
one.
lot. So
Yeah.
went to that one, and it was something else before that too. That's still something different now. It'll never go away. That club, it'll always be there, I guess. Um, but man, there's been a lot of changes. So different nowadays, and I don't even like going out. I don't like seeing nobody now. It's just crazy anymore. It just gets a little too silly. But you were talking about this other cool spot that you liked earlier, though. What was the name of that one you were talking about?
Fort Greene. So it's off of like 46 in Washington.
Right.
Um, it's just like it's a small bar, so unfortunately it can get like super packed just depending on who's there. But yeah, they have like DJs that go there. It's nice in the summer because they have like a nice little patio. But what I love about it is the decor. I'm a plant person, so they have like a bunch of plants everywhere. So yeah, it's pretty neat.
That's dope. So, what about like live music spots? You go anywhere that something like that? Is that something that you guys like to go do? Because that's something more I'm into. Don't get me wrong, I love DJ stuff too, but I like just the whole vibe of. I always kind of wanted to be in a band, to do something. So like something about that whole vibe. I'm a natural born entertainer. Like that's just what I've always done. You know.
Yeah, so I agree. I love live music. But no, we don't really go anywhere that plays live music. We do like a lot of concerts, so we'll go to like concerts and sometimes we'll look out and they'll have some like instruments and things like that. Um, but yeah, we go to a lot of shows like at Cervantes. That's
Oh,
that's
nice.
the hot spot. I like to go to like to little dive places, like where it's like more small and intimate. Of course we'll go to some shows at Ball Arena, but it's just like that place is so big.
Jeez, tell me about it. And then I'll never get used to that name either. It'll always be the Pepsi Center to me.
Exactly.
Same thing with like the Bronco Stadium. That's always gonna be mile high. I don't care who's putting the stamp on it.
Actually, okay, so we're going to a show May 1st, so it's actually coming up. The band is called Brain Story.
Mm.
So it's a three-man band and they have instruments. There's like a guitar, a bass, and a drummer. Oh my gosh. I'll send you the details because they're
Yeah,
really good live. Yeah.
yeah, that'd be cool. Like I said, that's my thing. I love like shows, concerts, like you're talking about. Man, there's so many that have been coming here over the last several years, and I've missed every single one of them, and I've been sad about every single one of them. So I'm hoping to make a change to that. I'm hoping to be able to start enjoying some of that soon. But I know, like you said earlier, you're a full-time worker, you're a full-time mom, full-time wife, all this stuff. So I don't want to take too much more of your time. But before I do let you go, you got to play this game with me for a second. It's called
Okay.
This or That. It's a game that I play with everybody, and there are no rules to it. It's all about preference. There's nothing in particular. There's no right or wrong answers. It's just what you prefer, this or that. So I only got a few of them for you. So we'll make it short and sweet. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just give you a couple example ones. So I'm gonna say like Pac or Biggie.
Okay.
All
Big.
right, who you got, Biggie?
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right. I'm more of a Pac guy, but I'll fuck with you. How about Stallone or Schwarzenegger?
Okay. I'm a thinker, so give me
That's all right.
Stallone for Rocky.
All right, like I said, there are no rules, and I can't argue your answers because this is how your preference is. Uh, since you're a hip hop DJ head, Mixmaster Mike or Z Trip? I think I know the answer.
Z Trip. Z
Yep,
Trip.
I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. That was a trick one. I was just messing with you. All right. How about Broncos or Nuggets?
Nuggets. Yeah,
Nuggets,
Nuggets.
especially right now, got a rep for the champs. They're gonna do it second time. Right? You feeling me? They're doing it right now. So I got two more for you, real quick. Shell tops or Jordans?
Shell tops.
I knew it. And vinyl or digital?
Oh, that's a hard one. I'm gonna stick with digital.
Gonna stick with digital. Wow, that's the only one I got wrong. I try to call it before I ask her. I'm like, she's gonna say this. That's the only one I got wrong. Well, thank you for giving me some of your time. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for playing my game. Thank you for all of it. This has been awesome. It's been an honor for me to get your first interview. I'm proud of you and what you're doing, and I encourage you to keep doing it. I encourage all my homegirls out there to check her out, the Baddie Activation Podcast. You can check her out on Spotify, Apple Music, Where else is it available? Is it on
Those are,
YouTube?
yeah, no, those are the only two. Yeah,
Don't you?
absolutely.
Okay, so check her out. You'll be happy you did. She's a very positive person. She's a good follow on Instagram. She'll be playing the jams, which brings me to my last thing here. You kind of inspired this, so I am gonna make a playlist with a song from everybody that I interview. But you got to give me the song. You got to throw me something on the playlist here. So what's something that you would like for me to add to it? That's part of your little spin list right now.
Oh shit. So let me grab it. So I've been jamming a lot of Living Legends. So
Living.
yeah, let me grab it because I don't want to misquote it.
And I love that you do that jam of the week, by the way. I love how you do that. And it's cool how to see you throw the vinyl on there and to
Yeah.
actually be spinning it. That's dope. That's a cool little touch to it. I like it.
Yeah, so okay, so the song is Living it's by Living Legends, Break My Heart. So that's been
Oh,
like the jam of the week. Yeah, that was the thing is like when I started the podcast because of the fact that there's and this is the other thing that people can get caught up in like there's already so many people doing it like why me and so I needed to figure out how am I going to separate myself from everyone else and I love music and so that's definitely my thing is I'll do every episode has a jam and I love to be able to kind of what we were talking about earlier like the power that music has, it's like I can find a jam and pull out a saying, a concept, and create an episode off of that. And that's how I've been rolling. And I've always had that, like the music that I've listened to for the past couple decades, like a lot of the music that I listen to now is like shit that I've been listening to for like 10, 15 years. And there's always something in that song where I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so powerful and like let's talk more about that so that's definitely I love to just bring that together and to share that with everyone.
thank you. That's awesome. And I love that you do that because again, like it makes you unique. It's a cool visual to see. And I love that you incorporate that into your show. That's pretty cool too. Very creative. That's that creative energy that you were talking about, right? I dig it. I like how you're flexing their muscles.
We all have creativity and it's funny because like to me I've always thought that creativity was drawing and I could barely draw a stick figure so I'm like I'm not a creative person but creativity is just it's not a one size fits all it's like
Nope.
whatever you want to do and like we're all creative creatures like we all have something to share with one another kind of going back to like we are all connected in some
Yep.
way and we just it's all about life is all about embracing your desires and not feeling, weird about it and sharing that with other people and you start to attract that energy and you start to attract like-minded people and that's really what law of attraction is like it's just how you and I are having this conversation right now. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like we attracted each other to have this conversation
Yep.
and we'll continue to attract more people and it's a beautiful thing when you can relate with other people with some of these concepts and these thoughts and just like where you're going in life and it's very magical.
I agree. And that's kind of the basis of my whole interview series here is because of that connection right there.
Yeah.
So I don't think I could end it any better than that. Like you just put the cherry on top for all of us. So Kisha, once again, thank you for giving me some of your time and sharing your story with us. And again, I encourage all of you out there, not even just my homegirls, anybody that's ready to hear some cool ass knowledge, some game being spit by somebody that's just trying to help. Check her out, the Baddie Activation Podcast on Spotify and Apple Music. Kisha, you have a wonderful night. Give that family some love for me. Thank
Yeah,
you for adding to our playlist. And hopefully we could get you back on one of these shows or maybe the Dro Bro show. I could get you on for a little segment or something. It'd be great to hear back from you
yeah,
because I feel like there's just so much that you're just oozing all of this awesomeness out of you and this positivity. So I'd like to capture some of it again. So
perfect.
thank you again. And like I said, enjoy your evening and give everybody my love.
I will. Thank you. Bye.
And for everybody out there, thank you for listening. And y'all have a great evening also. For more reviews, shorts, and interviews from the Vicious Network, check out the Vicious One.